My mother defends her boyfriend after destroying our late father's things, claiming it was to speed up the grieving process. But we sped up the eviction process. When my dad passed away, I was 17. It hit me like a ton of bricks. He was all I had ever known. My mom wasn't really in my life. She never really was, to be honest. The last memory I have of her before all of this was when I was 6. She suddenly decided to show up again. I think I expected it to be some emotional reunion, like her coming back to hug me and take us out of that gray place we were living in. But that's not what happened. She showed up, said a bunch of things about how much she missed me, and then went back to being the same. But deep down, I knew. Even a 6-year-old can feel when something's off. She wasn't there for me. She was there for herself. She spent the whole time being superficial, trying to look young, asking mom questions that didn't sound genuine at all. She tried to be more of a friend to my friends than an actual mom. She'd talk to me like she was my older sister. It made me want to run away and hide. I just couldn't connect with her. And honestly, my brother Lucas, who was 19 at the time, wasn't all that eager to reconnect with her either. Like me, he was raised by our dad, Carlos. He's the one who was there for us while she just disappeared. Lucas, of course, had a different perspective. He always tried to keep a more friendly relationship with her, but over time, even he started pulling away. It wasn't that he was cold or indifferent, but he knew, like I knew, that she was never going to be the mom we needed. Our dad was the one who shaped us. He was the one who taught us what it meant to have character, to fight for what you want. He was always there. He was the kind of dad who'd sit down with you on the couch and explain everything, from math to how to treat a woman with respect. And at the end of the day, when he was gone, a part of me went with him, the part that made me feel safe in the world, like everything was going to be okay in the end. And suddenly, I had to deal with losing him while still living with a mom who deep down, I knew had no idea how to be a mom, not like he did. When my dad died, the pain was indescribable. Not that my mom was a constant presence, but losing my dad felt like the ground just disappeared beneath me. At the funeral, my mom seemed as distant as she always was. She was there, but it was like she wasn't really there. Lucas and I grew closer. I don't know, maybe that was one of the few positive things that came out of the whole tragedy. The fact that we were now closer than ever. It was me, Lucas, and the empty house my dad had made into a home. But of course, even that was taken away from us. After my dad passed, things got even weirder. That's when my mom showed up again, with an attitude that made me wonder what was going on in her head. She brought this new boyfriend, Gabriel. I looked at him and thought, really? Gabriel was 28, seemed more interested in spending time with her than with any of us, and his laid-back, easygoing vibe just made everything more uncomfortable. How could someone who barely knew our dynamics just walk in like nothing happened? I tried to give him a chance. After all, my dad always taught me to be polite, not to judge before getting to know someone. But the way he looked at my mom, with that kind of worshipful gaze that didn't seem healthy, it really bothered me. What bothered me even more was the way my mom acted with him. She wanted to show him that she was in control, that she could be the most desirable woman in the room. She couldn't care less about us. She cared more about looking good, about keeping up the appearance that everything was fine, than about supporting us as her kids. It was like she was trying to forget the tough part of life and just live for the moment. Gabriel, on the other hand, seemed like a mere accessory. I was speechless every time I saw him in our house, in our space, the place where my dad would sit on the couch with Lucas, laughing at silly jokes or talking about whatever he read in the newspaper. But now, what was in our place? Gabriel and his need to be the center of attention. I felt out of place, like I'd been pushed out of the center of everything. The house, which used to be a refuge, was now turning into a stage, with my mom and Gabriel as the stars of a play we weren't a part of. And what bothered me most was seeing that Lucas, my brother, was once again trying to keep up appearances. He wasn't as bothered by Gabriel's presence as I was. I saw him adjusting with a patience I couldn't understand. It was like he was trying to give our mom a chance, as if she could somehow turn back into who she was supposed to be. but I knew deep down nothing was going to change. She would never be the mom I needed. My dad, Carlos, passing away didn't affect my mom the way I thought it would. Not that I expected some big, over-the-top display of grief, but there was just something cold, so distant in the way she handled everything. It bothered me deeply. The mom who, throughout my whole life, had been absent and only ever cared about her looks and social status, now seemed like a stranger amidst our family's mourning, while Lucas and I stayed busy organizing the funeral and taking care of all. The details that my dad would have handled, my mom just carried on with her routine like nothing had changed. She kept going shopping, meeting her friends for parties, and posting photos on social media with motivational captions that seemed like a desperate attempt to hide the pain she either didn't want to show or didn't know how to express. She was more concerned with what she'd wear to the wake than the actual losses we were dealing with. And that just made me angrier, like she was doing all that just to get attention, to act like she was fine when she clearly wasn't. Or maybe it was just her way of keeping herself away from anything that would make her feel. She was never good at dealing with deep emotions. But the real punch came when my dad's will was read. Carlos had been clear. The house, the home we grew up in, where so many memories were made, was going to be ours, mine and Lucas's. I couldn't even imagine life without that house, without the place he made into our home. But the biggest shock, and the one that hit me hardest, was the part where he left Carla a sum of money. Not a huge amount, but enough to make sure she could live comfortably without having to worry about anything. To him, it was the fair thing. He knew that, over the years, my mom never really wanted to be there for us the way she should have. He understood that money would be the only thing left that would tie her to him. When my mom heard that, her expression changed completely. The fake smile she had on when she left the lawyer's office disappeared, and for a moment, I saw something I had never seen before. Rage. Pure, uncontrollable anger. She got furious, more than any of us expected. I realized that, for her, the house wasn't just a reminder of our childhood. It was power. It was a symbol of control. She wanted the house. She wanted what my dad had done for us, like it was something she deserved, like she had some right to the place where she'd never really been a mother. "This house is mine too! I have a right to it!" she shouted one day, during one of her arguments with me and Lucas. "I was his wife for years! He should have left me the house! I'm going to fight for it!" Lucas and I tried to explain that the house was ours. It was what he wanted, what he decided, but she didn't want to hear it. In her mind, it didn't matter what my dad wanted, it was about what she thought she deserved. She started pressuring us, threatening us, even trying to manipulate us. Her words were like daggers, trying to hurt us where it would hurt the most. She played that role of a mother who feels entitled to everything, to controlling her children's lives, like she was the one who lost a husband, not us, who suddenly found ourselves orphaned. She didn't care if we were ready to move on. She wanted what she thought was hers. The pressure kept growing every day. She'd call Lucas and me separately, trying to convince us that if we just gave in to her will, everything would be fine. Like things would go back to the way they were. Like the house was a reward for all the sacrifices she made, which to me seemed like a pretty small effort, considering how much time she spent absent. I found myself getting more and more frustrated. She wasn't asking for the house because she really needed it. She was asking for it because she didn't know how to deal with the fact that life had changed. She didn't know how to move on, without control over things. Lucas, who's always been more patient and careful with people's feelings, tried to understand her side. He tried to keep the peace, like it was possible to avoid a war between mother and children. But for me, it wasn't about that anymore. It wasn't about peace or calm. It was about standing my ground, showing her that she didn't have control over us anymore, and that it was time for her to face reality. After all, life had always been like that, right? It was always her trying to manipulate others to get what she wanted. And then, suddenly, things started to get tense between us. Lucas and I started fighting more. It wasn't just about the house. It was about what we were both feeling, about the pain we were quietly carrying. While our mom tried to ignore everything around her, the arguments got more frequent, more intense. I didn't want to give in to her pressure, and at the same time, I was trying to deal with the pain of losing my dad, the feeling that everything around me was falling apart. She started behaving even more irresponsibly. She'd come home late, forget important appointments, seemed like she was living in her own little world. She didn't know what was happening with her, with us, but she definitely knew things weren't right. And still, she did nothing to change it. She wanted the house. She wanted whatever was my dad's, but she wasn't willing to take on the responsibility that came with it. She was trying to force us to bend to her will, and deep down, I knew Lucas was getting tired of it too. The already tense situation became even more unbearable when my mother, Carla, decided to introduce Gabriel to the kids, as if he were the solution to everything. He appeared in our lives so suddenly, as if he had always been part of it, and before we knew it, he was living in our house. There was no request, no conversation, no attempt at negotiation. It was as if he had a VIP, pass to just move in, no questions asked. And worse, he wasn't paying rent. Nothing, absolutely nothing. But he felt entitled to call the shots in the house, as though he had been invited to be the new head of the household, while Lucas and I were busy handling everything that came with our father's death. The paperwork, the will, the process. Of selling the house, Gabriel was getting involved in every little detail, acting like the new patriarch, even though he was nothing but an intruder in our story. He had nothing to do with our dad or our lives, yet he seemed to think he had the right to give his opinions. At first, I tried to ignore him. I wasn't interested in arguing. I was still processing the shock of the loss. But soon, I realized he didn't have the same sensitivity. It was as if, by moving through the house, he was erasing all the memories of our dad without any regard for what those memories meant to us. And that's when he made the move that made me lose my patience completely. Lucas and I had started organizing Dad's things, boxes and boxes of memories, books, old photos, work notes, even those things he insisted on keeping, like his youth football trophies and the old guitar he played when he had some free time. The house was full of these little things, which were, for us, the living memory of who he had been. It was our way of preserving what was left of him. But one day, when I got home early, I found Gabriel going through the boxes we had set aside to organize. He was throwing everything away. I froze in the hallway watching him. He was packing up everything our dad had left behind as if it were trash. I saw him toss a family photo frame onto the pile of things to be discarded, and when I walked over to him, my voice trembling with anger, I asked what he was doing. He looked at me with a smug smile and said, "I think it's time to let go of the past, Emma. This is all just junk. What matters now is the future." Those words cut me like blades. How dare he talk like that? How dare he do this to my dad's memories? I couldn't hold back the anger that was building inside me anymore. But I wasn't alone in this. Lucas was as furious as I was. He didn't know what to do, but he knew this couldn't stand. Our dad in life had always taught us to take care of everything with love and respect, and to see a man who didn't, even have the decency to understand how much those things meant to us, to our legacy, was too much. The confrontation was inevitable. Lucas and I went to Carla, demanding that she take action. She, as always, seemed distant from everything. She didn't care about the things, as if Carlos's memories were just worthless objects. There was no empathy coming from her. She sided with Gabriel, and what seemed like a simple mistake from someone who didn't understand the pain of loss turned into a huge barrier between us. Emma, you have to understand that we're trying to move on. You and Lucas need to start processing your grief. Gabriel is just trying to help speed this up. He has good intentions, Carla said, as if it were something so simple. As if she were talking about buying a new couch, not about destroying irreplaceable memories. And when Lucas and I tried to explain how much it hurt us, she simply shut up, backing Gabriel up, saying he was right to help clean up the space and move on with life. I felt that at that moment, she was truly on his side, not ours. She was more interested in moving on with her life, in distancing herself from what it meant to lose Carlos, than in protecting what was ours, what he had left behind. Carla's words echoed in my mind. Let go of the past, as if it were possible, to forget everything my father had been, everything he had represented. As if, somehow, this was a way of cleaning the pain. And I knew that, for her, this was a way of moving on. But for Lucas and me, it was an attempt to erase who he had been, to erase who we were. With all of this The tension only grew. We could no longer look at Gabriel and Carla the same way. And deep down, we began to realize that, for Carla, things had never really changed. She hadn't evolved. She didn't know how to deal with pain. She didn't know how to support us. She simply wanted to escape. As always, this created an even deeper rift between us. Lucas and I were no longer her children. Now, we were just obstacles in her way. And it was at that moment that we began to take more drastic, more definitive actions. The future, the house, our dad's memories, everything was at stake, and we were about to fight for what we thought was still ours. Here's the translation into American English, keeping a casual and conversational tone. The breaking point for me and Lucas came when we finally realized we couldn't ignore Carla and Gabriel's attitude anymore. The house, the only place that still carried a little bit of our history and our connection to our dad, was being turned into a stage for manipulation and disrespect. Carla and Gabriel were pushing their presence there like nothing else mattered. The worst part was our mom, who, instead of being on our side, was with someone she barely knew, ignoring everything that had been built before her and Carlos. That house, with all its memories, was becoming a prison for us and, in a way, also for her. It was impossible to keep going as if nothing was happening. We both finally made the decision that should have been made long ago. We wouldn't let Carla and Gabriel stay there any longer. We couldn't let her do whatever she wanted, destroying everything left of our family. They had crossed a line by invading our space, ignoring our feelings, and disrespecting our dad's memory. It was painful, but confrontation was inevitable. Lucas was as determined as I was. So, we decided to raise the rent and issue an eviction notice. We didn't want to be cruel, but we needed to put an end to it. In a way, I knew that was the only way to take control of our lives again. When Carla found out, she was furious. The anger in her eyes wasn't just about losing her house, but because for the first time, we were taking charge of our own story. She tried to manipulate the rest of the family, saying we were being unfair, that we were ungrateful. But we knew there was no more room for compromise. She wanted everything back, but she wasn't going to get it. The situation got to the point where Emma and Lucas decided to take it further. When Carla and Gabriel got married, an event that, for her, was more of a personal celebration than a union of love, since she barely showed any remorse for what she did to us, we decided it was the perfect time. The ceremony was set for the weekend, and on the day of the wedding, we gathered with trusted friends and, without hesitation, did what seemed necessary to restore our dignity. We changed the locks on the house. We shut the door that had for so long been a symbol of our frustration and helplessness. When Carla and Gabriel came back from their ceremony, with their eyes glowing with happiness and their minds far from any other concern, they found their things thrown out on the street. The suitcases, the furniture, the stuff they had tried to turn into decor for that house. Now it was all there, exposed with no place to go. It was humiliating, of course, but more than that, it was a reflection of what had happened. They were being confronted with the truth. They no longer belonged there. Everything they'd done to invade our space and take what was ours had been reversed abruptly. I saw the look on Carla's face at that moment. A mix of anger, shame, and a kind of disbelief. She tried to play the victim, drawing attention to herself as if we were the ones to blame for her own choices. She tried to appeal to the family, saying we were cruel, that we had no heart, but the silence that followed was the clear response. The decision had been made. In the end, the consequences of her disrespect for us were inevitable. Carla had to settle for a small apartment in a part of the city she never thought she'd end up. The house, the one she thought was hers, was rented out to new tenants, people who truly knew how to appreciate what was left of our story, who respected Carlos's memories. And even with all her indignation, she had nothing else to do. The power to control what she always wanted, to manipulate us into doing what she wanted, was gone. The house, which had been a symbol of our struggle and suffering, was now in the hands of people who truly understood the value of what was there. We, on the other hand, started moving forward. It wasn't easy, but the relief we felt for finally doing what should have been done from the start was indescribable. The weight we had carried on our shoulders, being forced to accept our mom's disrespect and manipulation, was starting to disappear. Over time, things calmed down. Carla tried to rebuild her life in her new apartment, But I knew that deep down, she'd always try to come back. We knew it would be hard for her to learn how to live without the old house, without the luxuries she thought she deserved. But the truth was that, after everything that happened, there was no place for her there anymore. And the house? Now, it had a new meaning for me and Lucas. It was ours, and we respected it for everything it stood for. Now, we could finally make it a place of peace, where our dad's memories would be cared for and respected. A home again.